I would like to introduce Joshua Foster, the chair of the JEDI Committee. Joshua, thank you.
Thanks, Will, everyone. Very excited to have you all here. This is going to be a very open discussion. As Will said, I'm going to do a quick presentation that's just going to kind of lay out and summarize the different propositions and measures that are coming up that we feel best directly relate to the design community here. But after that, it's just more of an open dialogue where all of us can kind of share our thoughts and our feelings about how these affect us as individuals and the communities that we're designing in. And as Will mentioned, also we have a special guest here today, Evelyn. She is a licensed restorative justice trainer with the International Institute of Restorative Practices. And she has some very good insight on a few of the propositions that we're going to be speaking about. So we're very appreciative of that. And then also a special thank you to Nami and as well as Kevin Ford, who couldn't make it today. They both were really integral in getting together this presentation and making sure that we had solid information that we can share with you all. So without further ado, I will be sharing my screen in a few seconds and we'll get started. And please feel free to type in the chat any ideas and things you have like that during the presentation. And then as soon as I finish wrapping that up, we're gonna open it up to more dialogue. All right. Can I get a thumbs up if you all can see the screen? Awesome. Okay, so what we've entitled this is the Architect's Los Angeles Voters Guide. And basically the purpose of this is because of the upcoming November election, there's over a dozen very important props and measures on the ballot for California and Los Angeles County. At this roundtable, like I said, the purpose is for us to be able to break down which one we feel best effective built environment around us. So like I said, this is going to be an open dialogue discussing everyone's opinions on the implications of voting yes or voting no on each item. And as Will mentioned in the beginning, this is brought to you by the joint SoCal NOMA and AIA LA JEDI Committee. So we're going to get started right away, and we're going to start off with Measure J, which is entitled the Los Angeles County, California Budget Allocation for Alternatives to Incarceration Charter Amendment. So that is a mouthful. Basically, the summary of that is it's a charter amendment to allocate money from the general fund to alternatives to incarceration. And it's on the ballot for LA County voters in California this upcoming election. So the design of the measure is basically that the charter amendment would require that 10% of the unrestricted general funds be appropriated to community investment and alternatives to incarceration. If it's passed, the amendment would become effective on July 1st of 2021 and implement the 10% allocation over 3 years with the full set aside in effect by June 30th of 2024. And the amendment also authorizes the Board of Supervisors to reduce the 10% allocation with a 4-to-1 vote during declared fiscal emergencies. So voting yes on this, some of the key points is that, as I just stated, amending the county's charter to require no less than 10% going to community programs. So this is such as health services, pretrial non-custody services, basically as a form of restorative justice rather than directly to incarceration. Another aspect of voting yes for this is authorizing the Board of Supervisors to develop a process to allocate these funds. And then the last one, as previously mentioned, is that also giving the Board of Supervisors the ability to reduce the amount allocated if there was ever a fiscal emergency. Voting no for this measure opposes amending the county charter to require that 10%. And so that it wouldn't be going to these community programs and alternatives to incarceration. So moving on to the next one we have here. We have Proposition 15. So Proposition 15 is entitled Changing Tax Assessments for Commercial Properties to Increase Funding for Local Governments and Schools. The name of this one pretty much explains itself, is that it'll require commercial and industrial properties to be taxed based on market value and dedicates revenue toward funding local governments and schools. So voting yes on this one means that property taxes on commercial properties that are worth more than $3 million would go up to fund local governments and school. Prop 15 would be phased in starting in 2022, estimating being able to raise between $6 to $12 billion yearly for these local funds. Voting no on this keeps it as is, and property taxes don't change from what was approved back in 1978. Moving on to Proposition 16, this one allows diversity as a factor in public employment, education, and contracting decisions. Summary of this is that it repeals Proposition 209 back in 1996, which says that the state cannot discriminate or grant preferential treatment based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in public employment, education, or contracting. So voting yes for this one allows diversity to be considered by public agencies. It does not alter current laws guaranteeing equal protection or prohibiting unlawful discrimination. Voting no on this one, Prop 209 ban on affirmative action from 1996 remains in effect. Moving on to Proposition 19. This one is changes certain property tax rules on property tax transfers and exemptions, allocates funding to wildfire agencies and counties. So this one, as it says in the title, it changes tax assessment transfers and also inheritance rules. Voting yes for Proposition 19 allows all homeowners that are over 55, disabled, or victims of natural disasters to be eligible for property tax savings. Inherited properties would only be eligible if used as primary homes or farms. It creates a state fire protection services fund as well. Voting no on this one means that some homeowners that are over 55, disabled, or victims of natural disasters are eligible for property tax savings. All inherited properties remain eligible. And the final one of our group of 5 that we're going to talk about today is Proposition 21. This one expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. And the quick summary of it is that it expands the local government's power to use rent control. Voting yes on this allows cities to limit rent increases for buildings at least 15 years old. It exempts single-family homeowners who own up to 2 homes. The ballot measure will require local governments that adopt rent control to allow landlords to increase rental rates by 15% during the first 3 years following a vacancy. Voting no on this one means there's no changes. Rent control is limited, thereby continuing to prohibit rent control on housing that was first occupied after February 1st of 1995, and housing units with distinct titles such as single-family homes. So these are the 5 propositions in Measure J that we're going to be discussing today. We as the JEDI committee felt like these were ones that most directly affect the built environment. But that being said, definitely a reminder to get out and vote. And while we chose these specific propositions, there are a lot more that are on the ballot. If you go to the registration page that is on the AIA-LA website, you can get this information here, and you can go through each of these different propositions that also has summaries on there as well, so that you can get a little bit more information and start your own research for the rest of them. But that is the end of the initial summary and presentation, and we will move forward from there. Bear with me as I find you all again.
Thank you,
My
Josh.
screen disappeared.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
Okay, there you all are. All right, so that was the quick summary. As I said, on the website, you can pull that up and you can dive deeper into those so you can digest it a little bit more. But we want to start by hearing from Evelyn. We can talk about a little bit about your thoughts in general about what you do and how you feel it's related to some of these propositions and measures that we brought up, and we can start the discussion from there.
Great. So thank you for having me here. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for being here today as well. Taking time off of your day. I know I'm a little bit Zoom fatigue, like we call it. And that's just because I do work at a charter school, every day I'm hearing some back noise, sorry. As a restorative justice coordinator, and my role is pretty purposeful at the school because in lieu of hiring a dean that's really in charge of promoting suspension and punitive measures, I came along and my role is to really support the students, the teachers, and parents to understand discipline and effective discipline. A little bit more about my background is that I have a background in social work. So the school really also wanted somebody that has that lens to understand a child from a whole perspective, a family from a whole perspective, and not just segments or components. So when I see Prop 15 on the ballot, I immediately get really excited. Number one, because during this pandemic, I have seen an increase in mental health concerns among our students and our staff. Part of what we have been assigned by the Department of Education is to come up with a plan to support our students as they're going through a pandemic and as they're attempting to learn with stressors going on in their body and their minds. And so it becomes really difficult, especially when resources are currently limited, considering that we have multiple schools that had to let go of some staff members because they didn't have any more funding that was kind of coming through, or there wasn't a need anymore to have those people on campus because there was nobody on campus. And so for me to see Prop 15, to see that money being allocated back into the communities and back specifically into an institute that's supposed to promote democracy, free thinking, critical thinking, critical pedagogy and learning and teaching is something that really excites me. And I can only imagine the impact that it will have on my students in particular. Most of them are people of color, low income, but also my teachers, who I think for the first time are really being pushed to become those people that, impact the child on a whole different level during a traumatic experience of a pandemic. So that's something that I think, me personally, I'm voting for because I can really see the immediate impact that will have within just even my school. I can only imagine within all the schools across Los Angeles. The next prop that I really appreciate is Measure J. And I know that you're a restorative justice practitioner, you're an educator, you're a social worker, but I cannot stress how the built environment does impact a student. I cannot stress that, just enough. I know that schools around the nation, and particularly in California, have moved or have pushed for restorative justice practices. So if we have built environments that are also kind of extending beyond the school and going into the homes of people and the homes of people who are, living in affordable housing, they're designed to resolve conflict and deal with issues and feel good about how they're living. I mean, I could just see that flourishing as well. I was really inspired by this group's presentation a couple of weeks ago because I started to think of myself, how can I be an active person in these spaces? If these buildings were designs or if these communities had these particular services, how can the 800 plus students at my school be really those advocates or those people that help transform the conflict that they see, help transform the trauma using the skill sets that we have built and taught them? And I can only imagine how important that would be. So that's another measure that I very much support, simply being because I have seen how much this can really impact the child when their environment is very much nurturing and catering to their needs as well. I know that we're here from different professions. I can only imagine, and different skill sets and different experiences. And so I think it'd be really great to hear from others as well. Or if you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer some.
Thank you very much for that. So now's the time we are opening up the floor. Any thoughts on what Evelyn just mentioned on any of the propositions in general, or any questions? I don't think any of us would consider ourselves the ultimate experts on these propositions or measures, but a few of us have done some deep research on them, so hopefully can at least guide some thought.
Thank you, Joshua. We're really delighted to have everyone involved tonight in this discussion. So ideally, everyone on the phone, this is a safe place. We encourage you to share your opinion and your thoughts, and also share with others, perhaps why you're voting a certain way on each of these measures. Or if you're just frankly looking for more information and access to that information, we can provide that as well. But I do want to give special thanks to Nami Chen, who's joining us today. Nami, did you want to sort of help start the Q&A?
Yeah, so I know this is not one for architects or built environment related, but Prop 22 is something that I feel strongly about. Prop 22 is the labor policy initiatives for app-based drivers, so Uber, Lyft, I believe DoorDash and Instacart are some of the other ones. That one, so this one is important to me because I think that misclassifying employees is it's just wrong. So it prohibits them from getting working rights protection in California, such as overtime or paid time off. And those are just some of the benefits that they don't receive as drivers. And these are drivers including those who work 12 to 14-hour days. So I think that in terms of healthcare, they should be protected. In terms of just fair wage, I think that's something that's really important for us to consider. So voting no on it is important for me.
Thank you, Nami. Anyone else on the call have a strong opinion one way or another on any of the other measures or ballot propositions?
Hey, Barbara, you can unmute yourself if you want to say something.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to, well, I'm actually against Prop 15 because I think there's no guarantee that the money will go towards schools. And I think a lot of small businesses that are already hurt from COVID-19 will even be worse off. The increase in taxes, which is exorbitant, will be passed down to tenants, food prices. I think farmers, everybody will be hurt by it. And I think there needs to be more incremental tax increases that are more balanced and that respect the difficulties that everybody has right now and will for the next year, given COVID-19. So I'm voting no on that. I've thought about it a lot. I've read everything, and I just can't support it at this point. And I think there's no guarantee that the schools will get the money. And it's not written into the proposition that it's dedicated. I think, to the schools. I think at one point I was reading there was a percentage that was left over, but in some of the rebuttals I've read that the money can be diverted if necessary. The other thing, I was talking to my son in regards to the proposition regarding Uber, et cetera, the transportation companies, and he was concerned. He Ubers all the time. He was concerned that the companies would leave California if there was no model that worked with their model. So I don't know if that's a risk or not. I was going to vote no on that too because I felt that they should follow rules. And even as a user, I would feel more comfortable. But I don't know if they'll just disappear and go where it's more lucrative. So that was my question. The last proposition that I really had concern was the one where there's the inheritance issue and allowing special tax breaks still as afforded in from Prop 13, the original Prop 13, for people who are over 55 or fire victims or other victims, that they can move 3 times to more expensive. And I think I sent in I had questions about that. I sent in a question a couple of hours ago regarding that. I don't know if that's good or bad. Whether it hurts kids who are being pushed out of the housing market and but they can't immediately move into their families' homes. And then if the homes are worth $1 million over what the original price was, that they'll be taxed anyway, and that most properties in California are worth over $1 million than what they bought it for. So it would mean every property, so anyone inheriting a property would pay an exorbitant inheritance tax. And on top of that, probably, well, what it might do is limit capital gains in California if the cost of, if the tax is, that's called stepped up tax basis, so that the difference in capital gains if they sold the properties, but they would be forced to sell the properties. So I was concerned about that, and I don't think it necessarily is better for seniors, except it gives them more places to move and more options to move. But I would love a discussion on that too. So I wasn't sure how to vote for that. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Does anyone have any initial comments on any of the propositions she mentioned and thoughts on them?
Well, I was gonna echo Barbara's. I think that was Prop 19. I wanted to kind of at least hear other people's thoughts on that as well. I didn't quite understand exactly what the impact of that would be, so I'm really just curious. That was what I was gonna say when I raised my hand, was about 19, just to see if anyone else had any other further insight on that.
Janice and Joshua, while we wait for more people on the call to maybe do their research, I do want to say that AIA California has officially endorsed Prop 16, which will repeal Prop 209, and therefore will make public contracting more inclusive. So that's something that I think everybody on this call should be more aware of. And therefore, as AIA California has endorsed it, AIA Los Angeles has also endorsed it, because we, as an AIA chapter, are in lock and step with our AIA California component. So look forward to encouraging everybody on the call to vote yes on Prop 16. Anybody else have strong opinions, perhaps on Measure J?
Looks like Randy, I saw you raise your hand.
Oh, can I just jump in? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hi everyone. I'm turning on my video too. Hi. Obviously I was on the call last week or 2 weeks ago for Measure J. I think that one's a really good one. I think we had a few people on who talked a lot just about the kinds of potential it brings to the state. I would obviously say yes on that one. But really, I raised my hand to talk about 19. I think what kind of sticks out for me on that one is the wildlife disaster victims. I think like the intention here seems like it has some sort of like climate change agenda, basically saying like, oh, if your house is destroyed, then you can buy another house and retain that property value. So you don't have to go buy like a $6 million house now when you had your $1 million home and then your taxes change, right? So I don't know anything about inheritance tax, but I mean, I think since so many people in California are so devastated and have, you know, just have such uncertainty about all the fires going on, I think that one seems like a good one to vote for, just because it kind of it's like a sort of insurance against wildfires for homeowners.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is exactly what came in the mail, and it's like that's exactly what it's talking about. So I was leaning towards that, but I just, once again, I know that, you know, some of these can also only tell one side of the story. So I was really curious if anybody had knowledge or insight to something that I may not be considering. But yeah, it was definitely explaining what you had just mentioned, Randy.
Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead, Barbara.
In response to 16, I have experience with this because I'm older, and I actually worked for several years on the Los Angeles Metro Rail, and I worked for I was a minority as a woman at that time in architecture as well, and but working for a white male-owned company. But there were many companies that were minority companies that were involved in the team, and we were all working downtown at the in Skid Row at the RTD building, and then moved to 7th Street, 7th and Broadway. But it's interesting when they ended up, you know, winding down in the end. It's like the white male companies that hired a lot of minorities and the minority companies that hired a lot of white males ended up letting go of all the, you know, the minorities were let go or paid less that were, and the white males that were working for the minority companies were paid more and kept their jobs. So it was really ironic, and I think there need to be, I think it's a good thing. I think affordable, because now as the owner of an architecture firm, maybe there'll be more opportunities if, you know, we switched owners, my husband and I. But it has to follow through in the companies. I mean, I think the contracts are awarded, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those companies are protecting their minority workers or hiring the minority workers. So you know, having seen this, watched it happen, you know, it's sort of interesting to me, and maybe that was what pushed it to be overturned originally. But I still think it's important that there be equal opportunities for everybody. So I wish it filtered down within each of the companies. I wish the minority companies had more minority workers that were protected, and the other companies, you know, also protect the minority workers. I don't know that the minority workers are actually protected after, you know, just because the owner of the companies are awarded contracts. So it's about awarding contracts and who they award them to. But that was just one experience. So, but there's always loopholes in all these things. So, and you know, like I think Janice said that there's two sides to everything.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what is important about some of these propositions, if nothing else, is opening up the ability to be able to get funding. Especially you're mentioning back on Prop 15, the fact that who will be being taxed there is commercial and industrial properties, and then the opportunity for that money to be able to go to education and local government, I think is what is a big reason why for a push for voting yes on that one, because the money right now, frankly, isn't there for a lot of these schools that aren't able to receive these dollars and these fundings, and for better for worse, feeling that taxing commercial and industrial properties won't affect the normal everyday citizen as much as getting money for their their local school system would. And so I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more your thoughts on what I guess, the implications of not having even that source of funding going to schools potentially would be, if you have any thoughts on that. Let me know if that made sense, Barbara. Sorry.
Oh, me. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think the cities need money first and foremost right now. They're really suffering. So before they allocate it to the schools, I think it would probably go to higher. But I think that for architects, there might be less work because, well, there's going to be the thing is, over the next couple of years, I've been taking some business seminars just because I've wanted to know more about what's going on. And the commercial sector, there's going to be less work in commercial because of this COVID thing. Everybody's working from home. So a lot of commercial spaces are sitting empty right now. There are opportunities to convert to housing, but as far as being commercial spaces, and all the commercial buildings are probably valued higher than 5 million. I mean, because everything's inflated, you know, everything is high. So I think everybody will be hit by this. And I think the commercial sector, particularly when this one real estate investment company, I took some through my college, I did a webinar, and they said basically, they were talking to Moody actually at the time, and they were saying the place to invest in the next 5 to 10 years is suburban residential developments, which would be a disaster for California. But that a lot of commercial investment is going to go away anyway. And so if there's no investment in commercial and they're being taxed to death, we're going to lose a lot of revenue as opposed to gain revenue, I think. And small businesses will be hit as well. So to me, it scares me. I'm not sure it's, yes, money, there should be money raised for schools, and it's better to hit commercial, you know, big corporations rather than small, you know, individual people that own houses. You know, it still protects that Jarvis 13, but I don't know how effective it is going to be for anybody at this time in the next 5 years. I just don't. So that's my feeling. And, you know, I went back and I've been looking at this for about a week, going back and forth, asking questions, but I'm really concerned. I mean, I think my small business probably will be pushed out. We're already we've been on a month to month because we couldn't afford a lease. And we're a pretty prosperous architectural firm, actually, given our revenue every year. But we can barely, you know, have to dip into private stuff to pay taxes every year, just because, one, the cost of architecture and architectural practice is so labor intensive. But also, I'm sure that our rents will go up and we might have to, you know, move back into our garage or something. But I think that I think it's going to hit everybody. It'll just be passed down, and it's quite an extreme tax increase in one shot. I know it's been a long time since there's been a tax increase, and money's scarce. It's scarce for schools and it's scarce for the local governments. You know, so Santa Monica's suffering a lot now with with the hotel business has been undermined by this COVID. So, you know, what'll happen to the hotel? Are they considered commercial? Sure they are. They'll be taxed, and they're already suffering. You know, so I still don't know about this. You know, if you can convince me otherwise, but if there's another way to invest in our schools, I know property tax, you know, individual property taxes pay for schools as well, but they're still pretty low. So I don't, if anyone else has some ideas about it, if they disagree with me, I'd love to hear, because that's why I'm doing this, so I can figure this stuff out on these particular
I didn't catch the order, but I see Randy,
think
Tibby, and Diane.
Yeah, you think you got the order right.
Okay.
I think if Tibby or Diane want to go, I've already said stuff, so go ahead.
I always want Diane to go before me because she always has something better to say.
I was just going to say that I'm also undecided about Measure 15. I live in a neighborhood where the middle school and the high school have a rating of a 2 and a 1. So our schools so need the money. But I sort of understand where Barbara is coming from because the threshold is really low. 3 million is super low. That's like every commercial property in LA, regardless of how big or small your company is. So that is kind of surprising that the threshold is so low. But at the same time, the schools, like I said, have a rating of 2 and 1. That's just unacceptable too. So I don't really know. I'm kind of hoping somebody could convince me one way or the other too. But it's a really tough predicament. And then of course we have COVID coming into the picture because we don't know what's going to happen in the next year as we go through this pandemic together, and schools are having to operate differently. So it's really tough.
Tibby Rothman?
Will Wright. So just speaking as just in general about taxes, and I'm just speaking as an individual here, right? And Barbara and Diane, of course, have done significant research that I haven't into this. But it's always interesting to me that the point of view that we have about taxes. And I say it with one caveat, and in Diane talking about the low threshold, which is concerning to me because so many small businesses, it's really the world is really targeted against them right now. It is really a struggle for small businesses. But I want to say just in general, in terms of taxes, I think we, not directly to this specific measure, but we spend so much more money as individuals because our taxes are so low, and we can't, I think of how fortunate my parents were and how generous they were to put me through a UC system, right? But I went to public school. My parents were wealthy. They were compared to most people. And there was no question that I go to a public school versus all of my friends right now who make much less than my father did. They are all sending their kids to private schools. And there's so much, so they're paying, my guess is, they're paying more than they would pay in taxes if they owned a small business. Second of all, just the stress and worry, in all of us in finding the right private school, the cost that it costs parents in terms of time. But I'm just talking about that in a general way about taxes because it's really disturbing to me in this country how we just say, oh, well, it's going to increase taxes. But if we did a comparison, the tax increase would be much smaller, my guess, in most cases, compared to all this privatization that's going on that is killing the middle class, right? And any discretionary income. All right, I'm done on my little soapbox. Thank you. Great to see you, Diane and Barbara. Nice to meet you. And Joshua, thanks for this amazing event.
Thank you. That was really, really helpful and insightful. Thank you. So we have Randy next, and then I believe Lisa. I saw something pop up on your screen. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I think the question of inflation is interesting because there are a lot of, even like, I guess our office too, we've negotiated our rent so many times and it's so reduced than what it was before COVID. And we deal with a lot of downtown clients and business building owners. And I think so many of them are just expecting their property values to plummet. So I'm wondering, even if COVID seems scary for these small businesses. Like, are property values going to kind of like slip back down and normalize because of COVID? So it's kind of like this on both fronts. Like, there's small businesses, but there's also like property values might decrease too because of COVID and the recession as a weird upside. But yeah, I do think the threshold is really low. It seems like that's almost every commercial property in LA. That's it.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, sorry to be late. I had it in my head this was starting at 6:30 and I was on time, but it wasn't. Right.
No problem.
But what an awesome conversation. This is so cool. And I hope I can like put together what I wanted to say. It kind of goes back to what you were saying, Tibby, and it's so awesome to see you, and I love what you had to say. But I feel like this conversation, you know, at some level, it's about, yes, we actually do need to be willing to support our society, and we do need to be willing to put the money back into our society. And part of the reason we are where we are is because of Prop 13, however many years ago, that just turned the school system upside down. And now we have what we have now, which is, yeah, I sent my kids to a private school. Because that's what you do now. But it's, you know, it wasn't true in those days. And I think it's a little bit like when you hear all this yelling about how, not yelling, I actually talked to a plumber today who was having trouble getting up to my mom's house because he said his secretary and one of his plumbers both quit because they were getting more money for COVID relief than they would working. And they had kids at home and the kids couldn't go to school, so they just quit. And the problem is, the problem isn't that they're being given support from the government. The problem is they weren't making enough money in the first place. And that's kind of the long answer to this, is that we need to get to a place where we all are getting back to a society, but that the whole economy needs to shift. The cost of living needs to become something that make it so that everybody has a good life. The problem is that's the sort of long term. So I'm happy to say, oh yeah, you know, we should pay more and it's okay having the lower threshold, because what it does is give back, you know, it creates a stronger community, which arguably, especially Randy, you were talking about property values, things are going to get haywire now. So it may actually be better to invest in our communities than not, because that's what's going to save us. But that all said, that doesn't answer the issue that, you know, Barbara, you have, which is, yeah, but this is going to kill me. So it's kind of the long term, we have to change the whole thing. I'm not sure how I want to vote.
Yeah. I mean, just to add to that, if that's how that is the feeling that is setting in with many, you guys imagine a teacher who's constantly for the last 25, 30 years has had to dig into their pockets to make ends meet for their children. This has been the story of the school system for the longest time, because it has not been built on that community sacrifice. It hasn't been built on, this school is getting a 1 or 2, how can I get engaged and involved in it? What do I need to contribute to do it? And then when the issue of taxes come, that's when we become activated. That's when we listen, that's when we're concerned, and that's when we want to make a change. But for me, it's coming from a place of, what is it we're willing to sacrifice, and how much more are we willing to do for people that have already sacrificed enough for many years? You know, I personally I'm a very strong educator, and I see it from people in my school who are the CEO that are making a ton, double, triple than what I'm making. Just their mental health is deteriorating, where they have had to take cuts back. You know, teachers who are still asking for the basic necessity are caseloads that have now went from 30 to 60. And so it's like, who's taking care of us? And I think I constantly ask that when I turn to the community, it's the same people that are impacted. It is the moms who have very little to give, but will give us a bottle of water, you know, just to make ends meet, or will just provide that comfort of everything's going to be okay. But I don't actively see the businesses there. I don't actively see the developers there. I don't actively see the architects there, you know, saying to our children, how can we get you to a profession that you can build this environment that you dream about for your community? I don't see them there until the issue of taxes come up, until they're being impacted in some way, shape, or form. Do I see the issue there? And I think that's what COVID-19 is really pushing us to do, is like, how can we do things collectively? Because we haven't been doing them collectively for so long and it's not working anymore. We're being depleted. And I just don't, and for me, it's like, I have to put away my high wage that I do have at the school right now and say, what do my kids need? And if that means that I have to take a cut back to ensure that there's another social worker there to provide that counseling, then I will do that, because that's what community does. And I will bounce back because I have the education to say, if this school closes down, I can go to another school. Heck, I could go to a country and go study there. And I have that privilege. I have those avenues. I have those resources. I've broken down those barriers. How many more barriers do we need to break down for the rest, though? And I think that is the logic that I usually vote with. And that's the logic that I do have in my purpose, is that I know exactly that I'm doing this for people in the community. And if I need to take a cut back for that, then I'll do that. Because at the end of the day, I need to push their barriers out the way. And so I do invite you guys, even beyond COVID, even beyond this, to reach out to these schools. I'm going to do my part, and I have been for a long time, but I want to get this architect people in my school. I want them to go in there and say, hey, did you know about architecture? Because I assure you, I went to USC and I wanted to be an urban planner. And it didn't work out for me because my heart and my purpose in this life is to do social work and really impact the school to prison pipeline. But I didn't know about urban planning till I was 18 years old. I didn't know that there's such a career like that existed. I didn't know you could become an architect and you can own your own firm and do it. It wasn't in my community, so I didn't see it. So that's the part that I'm doing. But I really ask us, when we think about this, is who has sacrificed what, and how much more are we asking from the people that have already sacrificed enough? And our school systems are depleted. They've been depleted for the last 30 years. So I just, that's kind of the perspective I hold, and I'm welcome, I welcome you all to, once this is over, if you want to come visit my school, I'm more than happy to have you guys there, so you guys can really see kind of what a community can do with the resources that it has, but also what it could do with it having more resources and more community engagement and more input. So I'm definitely open to that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think a question, a general question that I like to ask myself in these situations is, am I looking at this decision, and it's pretty similar to what Evelyn said, is am I looking at this decision as a citizen in the community or as an architect? Or in anyone else's case, whether you're in engineering or whether you, like Evelyn, an educator in any of these spaces, like how are you looking at it in that sense? Because there are a lot of ballots and propositions and things that come throughout the years that would really benefit us in the building industry on the side of how well our business will go, but that can have the direct adverse effect on the people that we are actually supposed to be designing for in these communities. And so it does add a lot of, I guess, tension and gray area or whatever you want to call it. And it is a decision that we each have to make, whether at that moment where we're looking to make sure that the business that we're working in thrives, or that we're going to be able to help make our communities thrive. As a number of you said, it is unfortunate that we even have to make those decisions one way or the other. But yeah, it's just a general statement and a question kind of going off with what Evelyn was saying. That is something a lot of times, unfortunately, we have to think about it and separate ourselves from our profession and what we're doing versus what is actually best for the community that we're living in, and especially the community that we're designing in. Because I'm sure many people on the call that are in the building industry, 9 times out of 10, you've done at least one project that is in an underserved community. And because there are so many, unfortunately, out here in this Los Angeles area. And so it's really thinking about how both of those things are going to affect.
Thank you, Joshua. Tibby, did you have your hand raised again?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, welcome.
Is that okay? Yeah, I mean, one of the arguments, apart from the fact, Evelyn, thank you so much, for everything you said, but what you both just capitalized is, how do we short-term small business owners may not want to support this, but long-term, it's so American. What do we have in the next day, right? But long-term, if they want to keep their business, right, increasing the wealth of our region overall in the long term benefits everyone, right? I mean, I do not, that is like one of our huge problems. How do we all, start making these arguments on a political and cultural and social platform that demonstrates, like, obviously, I believe in these things from a social justice point of view, but from an economic point of view, it benefits the region long term to have kids who weren't necessarily, who were born in very small circumstances or reduced circumstances because of segregation and prejudicial, culture, and making more money so that they are then able to shop at these businesses 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and that that supports those businesses, the children of those businesses, as well as them. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of off, but it's really, I think to me, that's like, how do we do a cultural shift in our city, in our country, to start looking at long-term and how these are actually win-win?
This is Will. I'm trying not to share my opinions because I have so many, but I put into the link, California, we're 41st in the nation of 50 states on how much per capita we spend on our students. And I'm going to be rather strongly outspoken for a yes on 15 because, at the end of the day, if you own commercial property or if you own residential property, you're helping fund our educational system. But currently, commercial property and residential property are treated the exact same way. So therefore, the single family homeowner is having to pay just as much per share of their investment as a commercial property. And most commercial properties are owned by real estate investment trusts. And so I think that one thing that we could do to really make California stronger is to invest more in education. And if that takes reallocating the way we do Prop 13, then so be it. I know it's going to be extremely controversial. As a staff member of AIA, I don't represent the AIA beliefs or core values with regards to that opinion on Prop 15. But I just wanted to share with you that link about how California, we spend 41st out of 50 per capita on education.
And we're the 5th biggest economy in the world.
Randy, did you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I've been flipping through my sample ballot, and it looks like there actually are protections for small businesses. It says there's exemptions from small businesses from personal property tax up to $500,000. So it really does seem like they're trying to avoid that whole like trickle down, like, oh, the renters are just going to have to pay for this. Like it's really going to come out of like a small business owner's pocket. It seems like there's going to be some sort of balance in play. It seems like there's some sort of consideration for a small business. So I think the question really is what Will brought up. Is it commercial property owners or is it someone else who should pay for these things?
I had a question or a comment.
Hi, yes.
Just that I'm a little up in the air about that too, because I believe so strongly in education. But even if you say you work for a large company, they're struggling because of COVID, and all of a sudden they can't make their rent. It's just too much for them. They've already laid off half of the company. It would trickle down to the employees, and more people would lose their jobs, or maybe the company would just completely go bankrupt. So anyhow, that's all that I was thinking. It's hard for me to decide on that without understanding it better.
Thank you, Hannah. I don't want to put you on the spot, Holly, but you're on the call and we're a small group. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of the, whether it's Measure J or the propositions. Are you able to share your opinion?
Sure. Sorry, it's kind of dark here, but hello, everybody. No, it's cool. No, behind won't help, but thanks. On my friend's garden. I mean, I think first of all, I'm pretty strongly yes on everything every proposition we've discussed, with the exception of 22, which I'm a no. 15 is really tough. You know, I think in 1978 I'm going to vote yes. I'm with you, Will. I think we at least have to make a start at rebalancing support for community facilities. You know, not just schools, but property taxes are all, you know, prior to 78, like funded most of our general services, and then increased dependence upon things like sales tax have led to bad land use decisions. Just, you know, cities becoming, you know, car malls, and it's a tough one. I think someone made a comment, almost every, you know, corner shopping center is going to be worth more than $3 million in California. So I do think 15 is going to have significant effects, you know, not just on corporate real estate trusts that own the majority of commercial property and supported, you know, by the way, not just Jarvis, but, you know, commercial real estate interests funded a lot of the work to pass Proposition 13 in 1978. And, you know, now I'm an old lady not wanting to be pushed out of my home by property taxes, and that was how it was sold. But it really was a huge benefit to those interests in 1978. And it's been a huge detriment to our public school system and other public services. I appreciate, you know, all of the perspectives of Evelyn and other people. It's going to be a really hard thing to wind down. That's unfortunate. You know, I think smarter people than us will have to figure out how to calibrate that, how to minimize the impact on businesses. And as many of the no on 15 people have pointed out, most, you know, even small businesses, they're on triple net leases where they pay property tax increases. And so it's going to be tough, but I think that's the only one I've been like really tossing around. And I think I've come back down to like, I'm going to vote yes for all of these, but 22. So if that's where I'm at. So.
Thanks, Holly. It's nice to hear from everybody, and I really appreciate all that you do for the architecture community. So thank you, Joshua. You know, as the host, you're welcome to keep this conversation going for another 30 minutes or an hour. But I just wanted to check with you on final thoughts and how you'd like to sort of wrap up the discussion.
Yeah. Well, I think so far it has been a really good discussion, and yeah, we have scheduled in the possibility for another 30 minutes if the conversation needs to continue, for sure. I think overall the point of this one was to be able to start thinking about it, and not just thinking about it, but talking about it with people that are in the same industry as us, because I think a lot of the times, unfortunately, as designers and people that work in the built environment, we tend to kind of separate our work, what we do day to day as designers, and what the impact to the community and the local ecosystem around us has separated from the actual things that we're building for them. And I think that it's a very good discussion to have one way or the other on what we feel are important needs for our communities that we're building, and what we feel are ways to be able to mitigate the issues that could arise from a certain proposition being accepted or denied. I think a really good example of that is what Evelyn is saying about whether or not this gets passed or it doesn't. The fact that there are still communities, there are still schools that need to know that in industries like our own are available to them. There are still ways that we can help on an individual level to start trying to balance out the the discrepancies between a good school versus a bad school, and being able to lend what we can to help out these communities. And so in my mind, I really see this as a kickoff for even after November 3rd, to have more discussions on, okay, this is what happened. It is what it is now. We can't change that. What can we do to make sure that the people who need the help are getting the help from the skills that we can offer? And so that's the general goal of this. Hopefully, even just having this discussion will help you think a little bit deeper as you're filling out your ballots. And so yeah, so thank you all for sharing your thoughts. And yeah, this isn't a hard closing. So if anyone wants to discuss any more of the propositions mentioned already, or that we didn't touch on, please feel free to.
Thanks, Josh. And before we do go to tonight, I just wanted to bring to attention something that Evelyn mentioned. You know, Evelyn, thank you so much for your passion, your insight, and your commitment to our community. I put it into the link. AIA and USGBC have worked or teamed up with the mayor's office to support their Careers by Design LA initiative. And so I put the link in there for you to sign up. But essentially, this is an opportunity for you as an architect, as a designer, as a planner, to get more involved and to help provide that pathway to the profession, to the K through 12 in the LA Community College District. So I look forward to your involvement with that. But as Josh mentioned, if anyone else has final thoughts, we welcome those.
Hi, everyone. This has been a really great discussion. So, I mean, thank you for everyone's comments and for hosting this, Josh and Will. Admittedly, this is the first I've cracked this nice voter guide here. So it's been nice to hear the different perspectives and counter perspectives. You know, it's kind of reaffirming of our democratic discourse here tonight. So I really appreciate that. I just wanted to ask a question, you know, as I'm sort of like researching these and bring it back to one of the first props that Josh brought up, which was about rent control. And maybe this is an open and shut one because it hasn't really been discussed. But I know that, I mean, that's something that I've heard, you know, both sides of the argument being good and bad. I would just be interested to hear whether people are for or against the rent control prop.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else have an opinion? I have a small clarification. I think, although there's a lot to say about the pros and the cons about it, I think one clarification is that if Prop 20 is 25, correct? For
21.
21.
Yeah.
If Prop 21 does pass, it doesn't necessarily mean that statewide will have rent control. What it means is now cities have the opportunity to you know, reestablish various rent control thresholds. So in my opinion, I'm leaning towards it because it now becomes a tool that cities could utilize at their discretion along with input from their community. So I'm not as afraid as I would be if it was just an instant drop into the California market. I think what it does is just allows cities to work with their constituents and come up with rent control measures that make sense for each of their communities. But that's my opinion. Don't know if it's even accurate.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up. That's the way I saw it also, Will, where that kind of made it a little bit easier for me to digest a decision one way or the other for it, because like you're saying, if it was a hard and fast rule on it, there are really good and strong arguments on both sides. And I was kind of like racking my brain. I was like, I don't really know, like one as a citizen, but also one that isn't in a apartment that is on rent control. So I'm like, how much is this going to affect me? But then also thinking about it from someone working in the building industry, like how is this going to affect the way our jobs are had, the fees and things, and just the whole trickle down effect. But yeah, that was a really good point you brought up, Will, that it gives the ability for cities and municipalities to be able to have a say on it versus the hard and fast. Yeah. Holly, I saw you jump on for a second. Sorry if I cut you off.
No, I was just going to agree with Will. You know, rent control is a tough one. Most economists say it's not a good thing, but it does keep cheer. That's more important than ever. And you know, I feel like I guess we had Prop 10 that went down a couple years ago that was going to repeal Costa-Hawkins. You know, for the folks who may or may not, you know, Costa-Hawkins really just did tie the hands of a lot of cities where no rent controls could be imposed on buildings built after 95, or in our city, what is it, 78? For, you know, for cities who already had rent control, it froze in place something in a really artificial way, in a similar way to 15, right? It's Prop 13 froze things in place in an artificial way. And I think at least opening it up for options. I don't, you know, not strongly in support of rent control as an economic position, but I think more options are better. I put it in the control of local jurisdictions. So I'm voting yes too, Will. Thanks, Josh.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you. Well, any final thoughts? Otherwise, we can get to our dinners or probably to more work. Evelyn or Nami, would you like to sort of share your final remarks?
Yeah, I think this is a great start. I know that I actually already voted because I like to vote whenever I get my ballot. I just go right at the door and do my research a lot beforehand. But I think what Joshua said was really pertinent. You know, restorative justice is all about the impact of our actions, and our actions will either go impact some people in a positive way or impact people in a negative way. And what restorative justice really aims to do is that when conflict arises, how are we going to deal with it as a community? Understanding that we can't do it, we can't fix a problem alone. It takes many people, and you know, many of us apologizing to others and amending those harms in order to make those situations right. So, you know, I definitely invite you to explore that a little bit more as you vote. What is the impact of this? How is it going to impact me? How is it going to impact others? And then once the decisions are made, what can we do afterwards? You know, I know a lot of people have said, well, I'm not sure if this is going to go to education. Well, you know, I could not be sure either, but I'm definitely going to be out there advocating so that it does go to education. You know, I will be out there telling my teachers to go advocate to make sure it's education, and my students and anybody who I know that loves kids learning and becoming the best version of themselves definitely will be out there. So the work doesn't just stop with these ballots. It kind of continues all around, you know, 365 days a week, a day, every year for the next probably lifetime, and even then after the next lifetime. So yeah, I just encourage you to, you know, vote with your heart, vote with your mind, but also vote with what you see every day around you and see what the better version of that do you want to have. So thank you so much again for having me, and I'm more than happy to provide you guys with any insight or if you want any support with the sort of practices, more than happy to do that as well.
Thank you very much, Evelyn.
So I think if, you know, we'll close with that elegant statement. Thank you,
Right.
Evelyn.
I saw Barbara. It looks like you were
Barbara
trying to say something.
Everything leads to anytime someone says something, it leads to something. And I know this was a question, but I'm opening a question on the rent control and the commercial. People are building a lot of mixed use projects right now that have a percentage, especially in Santa Monica, and the state requires that a percentage of affordable housing within those projects. So they're part commercial, part affordable housing. So I'm wondering how all these propositions impact those kinds of projects, because those are the people that are building housing. I'm wondering, you know, if the commercial gets taxed, the commercial portion gets taxed, and then they're exempt from rent control because they've provided a number of affordable units. Maybe that's what happens within a community. The community decides, I don't know. But it brings up all these.
So Barbara, I shared with everyone earlier, and I'll send it again, from the Urban Institute. They did an analysis of that. So if you can click on that link, I'll also make sure you have access to it. But Urban Institute did an analysis on Prop 15 and its impact on land use, real estate, commercial, mixed use. So there's some data that you can refer on that.